Welcome to the summer edition of the Sprint to Success with Design Thinking podcast.
How do you navigate change? It's a question we think about often, and one that today's world expects us to be comfortable with. The challenge, however, is where do you begin, and how do you develop the mindset and skill set to be successful? Welcome, everyone, to the Sprint to Success with Design Thinking podcast. I'm your host, Saba Kidwai. Join me each week as I share the stories and strategies from the world's leading researchers and practitioners about why they believe the answer lies in practicing design thinking.
For me, school was very tough. To the educators, the teachers that are out there, I'm sorry. I was a student that got perfect attendance, yet oftentimes my seat had to be put in the hallway because, as you'll notice, I talk fast, but I also love talking. I love people, and I had a tendency to talk a lot and really didn't really know my place there. So I was perfect attendance, and every teacher knew me. Yet I was really struggling through high school and college, for that matter. I got into a couple different colleges to play hockey, and I got in on probation for the grade side of the house. And for me, reverse engineering a lot of my life is what I do at this moment. But at the time, I didn't realize it. But one of the things that I learned, or I look back on, and I realized was in high school and in college. In college is a little bit more evident and easier to share. But in college, I was the assistant captain of my ice hockey team at the small school in Virginia that I went to. I was the president of my fraternity, and I was a computer science major. And I can tell you, nobody was a computer science major that played hockey. Nobody that played hockey was in a fraternity. Nobody that was in a fraternity was a computer science major. And what it was so beautiful for me was I never felt like I needed to fit in or find my one tribe. And I loved bringing these different groups of people together. Like a couple of my best friends, one of them was on my hockey team, and two of them were in my fraternity. And they're still, all these years later, 17 years later, are super close. And it was because of that world I brought together. And it was the same in high school. I tried out for plays. I was a DJ at a skating rink. I was on the baseball team, and I surfed in the morning, right? Like that was like, I've always had that tendency in. And so for me, when I got out of college, I ended up getting a job at UPS delivering packages, actually an amazing union job that paid really well because I couldn't get into a technology job. And I don't think you even know this story, but I was wearing my fraternity letters after getting done with a full day of UPS, standing in a grocery store. I had picked up milk to bring home, and someone in front of me turned around and said, "Hey, what fraternity? Like, where'd you go?" And I said, and he was like, "Oh, one of my best friends went to that same in the same fraternity, same college." And we talked a little bit, and he's like, "Do you know anything about cybersecurity?" And I'm very honest and just kind of and I was like, "Nope, not really. Never took a class." And he's like, "Have you ever heard of what a vulnerability is?" I was like, "Nope, I can guess." He's like, "What about intrusion detection?" I was like, He's like, "Could you get a security clearance?" I was like, "Oh yeah, I think." I was like, "I've never tried, but I think." And he was like, "So I have an entry-level help desk tech job it's about cybersecurity. And the good news is I don't have to unteach you anything. So it would be brand new." And he's like, "And if you can get a clearance, I would get you the job." And I interviewed the next day, got the job that day. It was an entry-level help desk position in the U.S. government supporting actually the military ID card. So everybody got a military ID card. We ran the help desk for that military ID card. And then about 6 or 9 months into that role, on a Friday afternoon, the boss came in and he said, "Raise your hand here if you're willing to go to Korea on Monday and teach our course." And so there was about 14 of us in the room, and I happened to have my hand up first. And he's like, "Brian," he's like, "real quick, do you have a passport?" And I was like, "No." I was like, "I've been to the Caribbean, like on cruises. Does that count?" And he's like, "No." He's like, "But you think you could pull this off?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm confident I can pull it off." So I ended up getting a same-day passport in Washington, D.C. the next day. Waited out, it took 8 hours to get it. And Sunday morning, I flew on my longest flight ever from D.C. to Atlanta to Seoul, Korea. I took a 2-hour high-speed train down to Daegu, Korea. And the entire time, I was learning what I was teaching in this 4-day course, because although I was on the help desk, I had never trained or got in front of a class at all. I felt like I was comfortable. And so it was a 4-day course. They had to pass a test in the end. It was 25 U.S. military members that were stationed there. And it was a cybersecurity course. And every night I went back to the room and really learned what I needed to teach the next day. It was one of those like moments. And I remember feeling very confident that I did a good job, but also very overwhelmed at like how big of a responsibility that was in working with the military. And I flew home, and I remember I got back to my office, or I was actually on my way to the office on that Monday, and I got a call from my boss at the time and the government lead, and they said, so apparently you made an impression. The government lead said they would change our courses from once a month to 4 a month if we were willing to bring you on full-time into that position. And I can tell you, it was like 4 pay grades up from where I was at the entry-level help desk. Eventually, within a year, the person that hired me became my employee. I grew that role. I spent there in that same role for about 8 years. I grew it to a team of 32 people running a multi-million-dollar a year budget. The first 30 people that were on our global team were all older than I was. So although I was the manager and running a lot of these things, I was the youngest on the team. And I tell that story a lot. I don't tell the story a lot, but I'm sharing it here because, not only was it, making your own luck and kind of figuring it out, but, I took that opportunity. And during those times, working for the government, making really good money, I traveled to 54 countries. And being someone that, my first trip was the one I raised my hand for, 3 trips to Iraq, 2 to Afghanistan. I've now been to 76 countries total. But for me, it opened my mind to this world that it was either stereotyped or media blasted what the world looked like. And I can tell you, I've been to the Middle East 30 times. My favorite country in the world is a country called Bahrain. It's a little island off of Saudi Arabia. I can navigate the country of Kuwait without a map. I've been to Kuwait so many times and driven around in Kuwait. And I think that was, to me, the start of like this idea of like what I was led to believe or what I had grown up into. I should question, or I should explore, or I should really be curious, right? Like, what's the curious element there?
It's your turn to join the conversation by sharing what you enjoyed or what questions you still have. In a world where time and attention are so valuable, thank you for choosing to listen and for being a part of our Sprint to Success with Design Thinking community.